love me. And I pictured that happening, and it felt very good. And it was so funny this morning. The next minute, I pictured myself going home from here and trying to make that happen, and it not being able to happen with my father. And I hated him. It was instant hate.
Recognizing your feeling of wanting to be understood and loved and held by him, and his ability to do that, are quite two different things. That your denial of that feeling of wanting that, that's what blocks you. Once you know you have that feeling, then you can begin to hear who he is and experience with some compassion his predicament of being unable to express his love, or to be unable to be the kind of father that you might want. It's as if once you know that you're beautiful, acceptable, then when other people don't like you, it begins to you see it as their problem, not yours anymore. Until you have allowed your own beauty to be, you never see it as their problem. You always see it as yours. And all paranoia you take back in on yourself. So the first step of the game is what you've started with, which is acknowledging your desire for love. As long as you're straight with your feelings, then if people can't fulfill them, sure, you'll go through self-pity and anger, and you have to be honest with those too. But you'll begin to appreciate that they're just doing their karma. They're stuck in what they're stuck in. And you'll sit with your feelings and allow them to be who they have to be. And your life will be that of somebody who needs love and doesn't get it. And you'll go through self-pity, and then you'll say, well, that's the way it is. And here we are. No. But to make believe you don't want it because you're not getting it, there's where the trap is. Can you hear that? Yeah. One dies as one lives. Mahatma Gandhi walks into his garden for a press conference. He gets shot, and at the moment he's shot, all he says is Ram, just the name of God. He just has time. He says the name of Ram as he goes, because he's so already with God through his life's work that the moment of transition of body to not body is just another moment in which he's with God. So once that starts to fall into place and feel right to us, then really the essence of a dying retreat becomes the essence of a living retreat. And then the question is how you use the experiences, the moment-to-moment experiences of your life, as a way to become optimally conscious, to be optimally in the spirit or with God. And so then you start to examine the various components of life in order to bring them into this same awareness that we're just talking about now. Because what you find is that you can agree with everything I've said, but that big chunks of life are totally unconscious. That you say, oh yes, I understand this, I understand what my life is about, but I'm really angry at so-and-so. And somehow that anger and that relationship never comes into the rest of it. It just stays in its little compartment. And what happens to a relationship when you understand that the meaning of the events and the experiences of your life is to awaken or to live in the spirit or to be fully conscious or with God or in your own true being? And you say, yes, but I have this relationship because I need love, or I have this relationship because but. But if you push this if you push this and push it and push it, you see that ultimately everything must go into this same stew, and you have relationships in order to awaken, and you have relationships in order to live in the Spirit and to be with God, and to awaken out of the illusion of your own separateness. And that's the real essence of relationship. It's the vehicle for awakening out of the illusion of separateness. And when you understand the integration of this higher wisdom with the daily life events, you begin to see how relationships are a form of devotional or dualistic. They're a form of yoga. They're a form of coming into union, which is what yoga means. Now, what you see in other human beings is very, very much affected by your motivation and by your perception of yourself and by your own preoccupations. If you are busy, if I say to you, "Who are you?" and you say, "I am somebody who is dying," then you will tend to see other people in terms of who's living and who's dying. If you are somebody who doesn't like your body image, you are inclined to look at other people's body image. If you are somebody who is preoccupied with your own personality, with your own depression, for example, you're inclined to look at other people in terms of their happiness. Why can't I be happy like she is? If you have a very judging mind in which you're judging yourself continually, then you see other people as judging you all the time. You tend to project outward what is familiar to you, which is the way you look at the universe. You assume other people are looking at the universe the same way. So that if you are preoccupied with your sexual desire system, and that colors your perception because it locks you in all the time, you will see other people as thinking that too. And by the same token, if you think that you are God and you see God in yourself, that's what you'll see in other people. I recall when I was with Maharaji, I felt so inadequate and so unworthy that I would continually say to him, "How can you send me away? How can you send me back to the United States where people are going to want things of me and I can't fulfill them? I'm not a dharmic person. I'm a totally impure person. I've got all this lust and this power trippiness and this insecurity, and what are you doing? You're just sending me into the lion's mouth and you're giving me no protection. You haven't given me anything to protect myself from my own impurities." I said, the worst thing I can imagine is that I can do damage to another human being, that I can do stuff that will create karma by creating suffering. And I said, "I'm just too impure, Maharaji, you know." And Maharaji at that moment looked at me, and he looked at me like he was looking at a specimen. And he looked at my hair and my head, and he looked at my eyes, and he looked, and he came up really close, and he looked like this. And then he had me turn around. And I turned around, and he looked in my ears, and he looked, and he looked, and he looked, and he did this whole routine. It was a Marx Brothers routine, and he did the whole thing, and when I got all the way back around, he looked, and he looked very surprised, and he said, "I don't see any impurities." And of course, my first reaction was, that silly old man. You know, because any fool can see my impurities, but you see, any fool sees their own foolishness. And what he saw was his own godness. And he didn't see the impurities. It was my preoccupation with my impurities which was feeding the whole situation. not his. He was saying, maybe there's another way to look at who you are. That seemed to be the essence of the message. And if you are preoccupied with power, as I have been most of my life, then you will see relationships in power terms, and you'll be afraid of being controlled in every relationship, or being suppressed, or being dependent. And those are all power-related things. And that's because your preoccupation is with power because of your own feelings of inadequacy or impotence or whatever. The way the mind works is often to develop concepts and then to live within the concepts rather than in the immediate experience. So that you develop a concept of who you are and who another person is, and then you live in terms of the relationship between the concepts rather than in the immediate experience that exists between two human beings. For example, if you experience yourself as being a wise person and somebody else as being unwise, and you're caught in that label, then even if they say something wise, you can't hear it because you're so caught in your labeling. I mean, we've got to find behind all the symbology that there are living, breathing incarnations of God. We've got to see through the symbology. We can only see through the symbology when our attachments to those symbologies are cut through, when we've gotten rid of those attachments in ourselves. And if you need those things, then you're attached to them. For example, if you need to be a nurse, if you're a nurse and you need to be a nurse, then you need to have patience. And then you load somebody into that symbolic package of patient in order to satisfy your need to be a nurse. If you need to be helpful, then you need people who are helpless. If you need to be sadistic, you need people who are masochistic. To the extent that you identify with any social role whatsoever, then you will seek out somebody to enter into a symbiotic relationship. You scratch my neurosis and I'll scratch yours. You let me be holy because you be profane. I am somebody who needs to love but be rejected, so you need to be somebody. I am somebody who needs to love but be rejected, so you've got to be somebody who needs to be loved and reject me. So that honing device, it's so incredible how subtle the whole game works. People say, I don't know, I always end up with the same kind of lover. And they're always surprised. Every bit of information about all of us is written so large on our foreheads. I am somebody who will screw you, count on it. See? And then you say, oh, your eyes are so beautiful, I just want to be with you, you see, and you just seemingly ignore all this, and then when they screw you, you say, oh, God, I got screwed again. And when you look at the world in terms of this kind of symbiosis at the personality level, you see this incredible game going on. Conscious, unconscious human relationships. There's a comic book called the Doctor Strange series. And in the Doctor Strange series, the way you see it in the comic books section is people come down the street and they have these huge nets coming out of their head. And these nets are full of statements like, this is who I am, this is who you are, this is how it is, this is who I am, this is who you are. So somebody goes down the street like this is who I am, this is who you are, this is how it is. Somebody else goes down this is who I am, this is who you are, this is how it is. Somebody else goes down the street like this is who I am, this is who you are, this is how it is. And the game was to net everybody all the time. See, and the nets would come and they would surround other people and everybody would climb into it. And it's extremely interesting to be around people who have so much symbolic value that they are used to netting everybody around them. And then they really need somebody who isn't netted by it. If everybody gets caught in your game, you lose. Do you hear that one? If you win, you lose. And that's the horror of it. That's the horror of the way the mind creates these models and then seduces everybody into them. Because you feel secure in the model, but it's secure in your prison room. And that's the horror when the door is open and you don't walk out because you're too secure in the prison room. Well, how might you see other people? How might you see individual differences in other people? There is the matrix of individual differences of the body. So when you look at another person, you see man, woman, tall, short, old, young, fat, thin. You see physical characteristics, you see bald, you see pretty, you see weird looking, you see whatever you see. Those are all the qualities of the physical body. If you look at a matrix of individual differences in terms of personality, you see sad, happy, achieving, depressed, lonely, dependent, joyful, seeking God, intelligent, acting. You see a whole set of another set of individual differences that within the personality matrix of an individual. That's two matrices. Then there's a third matrix in which you look out and you see other individuals in terms of there's a Leo, or there's a Taurus, or there's a Sagittarius. That's another individual difference matrix based on your astral body. And those are all the ways in which you can say, I am different from you, is different from her, is different from him, and you can make that whole matrix of individual differences. Those are three matrices. And individual differences, when you live only in the realm of individual differences, then you get stuck again and again in the world of judgment. Better, worse. It's better to be young than old. It's better to be, fat than thin, or it's better to be thin than fat. And it's very weird when you move from culture to culture and it's all shifting. But if you see other beings, when you look into someone else's eyes and you see that there is just another being looking back at you, another entity, another soul, another patterning, another thing, another ray of God, or you can call it whatever you will, another bit of awareness. And that bit of awareness has around it all of this stuff, which is the packaging or the karmic manifestation or its predicament. And all these individual differences are like packagings around it, just like, and you don't confuse the contents with the container, or the containers as this case may be. But if you confuse yourself with your containers, you're going to confuse other people with their container. If you are busy thinking that you are primarily man or woman, if you primarily think you are sick or well, if you primarily think you're old or young, if you primarily think you're a mother or a child, then that's the reality in which your mind is working, and that's what you create for everybody else around you. And that ends up in judging. This person is a better mother, or better, or this, or less good, or taller, or shorter, or darker, or lighter, or gooder, or eviler, or whatever your polarities are. To look and see in another person that other thing that's just like you means that you can look at the individual matrices as the karmic unfolding, and then you can get into a space where you do not judge another being. You may judge their actions, but you don't judge the being. And that is the realm in which unconditional love can exist. I love you because you are God in form. So what is the essence of conscious human relationships? If you look at any relationship as like a pyramid in which there are 2 points down here and there is one at the top, take a marriage. The vehicle of marriage, when you use marriage as a sadhana, as a spiritual practice, the way in which you use it is to work through the relationship in order to arrive at the place where there is one awareness, but there are 2 bodies, 2 personalities, 2 astrologies. Okay? In other words, you work until the relationship exists where there is simultaneously the one and the two. And you use the two to arrive at the one. And it gets so that just as these 2 hands are clapping, and there is one mind and these 2 hands, and this hand isn't busy being the left hand and this busy being the right hand, they are just 2 hands doing their part to make the clap occur. So there is one awareness and 2 people. Now, to use a relationship that way, that is the process of what I started the lecture by saying, using relationships in order to awaken to God. To see who the other person is, see who you are, you yourself are, through the relationship. For a relationship to do that requires a tremendous amount of consciousness and space and meditation and intent. And it is hard work, as most of you who have ever been in intense interpersonal relationships have found out. Because in that one, in order to realize the oneness of the two, every bit of identification you have with the two has to be given up. You've got to give up the two into the one, and then from the one you will be the two. It's the difference between I am a man versus I am God that is being a man. You go from an identity with the two into an identity with the one, and out of the identity with the one comes the manifestation into the two. It's a cycle that has to go in. But what happens is, as the two go towards the one, you are literally dying into love, you are dying into awareness, you are dying into the oneness of it. And that oneness is called love, or it's called awareness. Or it's called truth. And because of our attachment, our karmic attachment to our separateness, when a marriage or a relationship starts to work too well, we freak. And what you usually see in relationships is they end up being, one person is running away, pulling back, and the other person is opening. I love you, why aren't you there for me? and the other person's pulling back. Then, after the other person's been like this for a while, they say, well, screw you, and they start to pull back, and the minute they pull back, the other person starts to remember how much they love them, and they start to go. And you see the dance going like this, and it doesn't really matter who's playing what part. It's just so that it's a conspiracy to keep from falling into love. Because when you fall into love, you cease to be. And so a conscious relationship has to edge in very slowly and very consciously. And it's why one needs so much meditative space in a good relationship to keep it living truth. Because usually when the fire gets hot, what happens is everybody starts to get singed a little bit. Ego gets burned. Ego burns. Soul doesn't burn. Ego burns. See? Ego starts to burn. The minute it starts to burn, it immediately pulls back into kind of mechanical habits. Hello, good morning, I love you. Ooh, do you know how much I love you? It all can be done. All the rituals can be done, but there's no juice in it anymore. The living truth went out of it because everybody got scared. And I'd say most of the couples that ever come to see me that are having a hard time, they have the potential of incredible living truth, but they got frightened and they pulled back. And then they both felt hurt and frustrated. And the whole process is opening it up once again. And the way it is opened up is by wanting to have it open so bad that the two of you are willing to deal with the truth of the pain and the truth of the confusion and the truth of it all and stay in it. And be able to sit with another person and say what you feel and what you think, and not say, I won't tell her this because it would hurt her. That's the one that corrodes relationships. The result is I will keep it to myself, and the minute you have something in yourself you will not share with me, I become him. I am no longer us. If you and I agree we will be us together, we're going towards the one, we are us. But then I start to have, say, sexual desires for someone else. And I don't want to tell you that because it might hurt you. It would hurt you and you'd get furious. So I say, well, I won't tell you that. The minute I do that, I have set up a part of my mind which is now closed off to you. And every time I am in that part of that mind, you must become an object. You are no longer us. You must be her or him. And if there is nothing that I cannot share with you, then you and I are us. Like somebody's taking care of you, and you really are a little angry at the way they're doing it, or you wish they would stop, or you wish they'd do something, or you'd like to ask them to do it, but you don't want to tell them because you fear you'd be an imposition. So the result is you say, oh, well, I won't tell them that. I'll just keep it inside myself. And the other person, if they are sensitive, just feels like when I sit with another human being, I can watch, I can look into their eyes, and I can see. I'll tell you what I see. I see that when their mind is in a place where everything is wide open, there is a liquid, luminous doorway in their eyes, and I can look in and in and in, and I can see Maharaji. And the minute the thoughts come into their mind, which they can't tell me because they're about me or about them or something, that is that place that locks in where I become object, I see an opaqueness. And it's just as if a door closed and a big sign says, keep out. And I get this cold feeling, and the result is I get paranoid. I mean, that's what people do. They get paranoid. You feel unloved. People don't understand how sensitive relationships are and how much living spirit demands living truth and how volatile living truth is. And what price you are paying for keeping it nice. The niceness between somebody who is being a patient and somebody who's being a nurse. The niceness between a husband and a wife. The niceness between a parent and a child. And I'll tell you, we cannot afford so much niceness because we are dying in it. And most of you, if you are like me, starve to death in that environment because you're so hungry for a living truth in human relationships. So when you are ready, what you offer, when you want to be out of your own prison cell, what you offer other human beings is the work you do on yourself. And the work you do on yourself is to come to the point where you are no longer identified with your individual differences. So all of your stuff and all of your stuff of your fears and aggressions and sexuality and embarrassments and all that, that's your stuff, which is connected with those matrices of individual differences. You are no longer identified with them, so you want them, you can have them. You want the fact that, I'm perfectly willing to tell you that I have hang-ups, that I'm insecure, that I'm paranoid, that I've got perversions, that I got everything. You want them, you can have them, because I can't afford to keep them from you. Because I need that flow with everybody around me. Because that's the way I can live in the Spirit. Because the Spirit is that flow. And the minute I turn off that flow in order to protect myself because I identified with my perversion or my anxiety or my anger or my insecurity, I just turned off the world, I stopped the flow, I froze it, it calcifies, it becomes an institution, and suddenly we are just bumping against each other. Don't get too close. Don't come in. Don't play. So what do you offer someone else? You offer them your truth. You offer them the irrelevance of your stuff. You can't imagine how refreshing truth is. When you are working with somebody and you're taking care of them and you're begrudging that time to them, or you're begrudging because they're taking too much space, and you keep it in, all you're doing is creating your own ulcer, your own early death, and you're also destroying the living truth that exists between people, and you're cutting off the person from real human contact, and you just did it again. It takes a little bit longer, and it's a little more painful, and it's kind of volatile to deal with truth. And the thing is that you cannot deal with truth with other people who don't want to deal with truth. That's the problem. The distinction isn't that you have to tell everybody everything. The important thing is that you have to be able to tell everybody everything. Okay? And that's the key one. You may meet other people with whom you've entered into a contract where you are willing to share everything because it's a living marriage, a living truth, a living relationship. Then you share everything. But otherwise, you merely have to have the capacity to be able to share. As far as you're concerned, the stuff isn't there. Then you are an open, free environment, and the other person can come and play if they choose. And can you imagine what it is like to be nursing, being a nurse in relation to someone in which you are merely right here and you're free and you're flowing and you got your stuff and you get angry and you got all that stuff which you acknowledge and it's right here. And if the other person says, how are you feeling about taking care of me? You can say how you're feeling if they're really asking. But you don't have to go up and say, I really can't stand taking care of you. You don't have to do it. That's the psychological thing, the have to. You've got to listen to hear who other people are, and each person has to get what they got to get. If somebody wants to stay in their prison, you have the moral obligation to leave them in their prison. You have no right to force somebody out of their prison. And truth destroys prison walls. I'd like to go through the aspects of this retreat and reflect about how they fit into a daily life practice or what even we mean by daily life practice. Yesterday we talked about relationships and what it means to work with a relationship to become conscious through it. And just to clarify any misconceptions about, we're talking about truth and marriages and so on. The implication is not that you have to be truthful with somebody who doesn't want to be truthful. The implication is that you are capable of being truthful. That's the important thing, that you could be truthful, not that you need to be. Doesn't mean you lie, it just means that you don't have to say it all unless the contract with another human being is that we will share truth. And some marriages are vehicles for awakening and some are not. Some are marriages that are going fine. They were based originally on passion or on psychological compatibility or on economic facility or cultural expectation. There are a number of reasons why people get married. And those motives come and go. Often the passion leaves and people don't quite know why they're married anymore. Now, some marriages are convertible into living truth and living spirit, and then the marriage becomes that aspect of your life which becomes your major vehicle for awakening. But it may not be. It may be a nice marriage and a comfortable marriage, and then your meditation becomes your major vehicle for awakening. And the marriage isn't that vehicle. Everything in your life ultimately will be affected and colored by your spiritual work. But you start out working with what is workable. You don't start out demanding that everything be used immediately, because it isn't all usable immediately. Ultimately, every tiny bit of your life is touched, but let it happen slowly and naturally and in its own time, rather than forcing it too quickly. Like what you eat, who you're with, how you spend your money, how you earn your money, what you wear, what you think about, where you go, why you go there, how you get there. All of these are aspects that can awaken or not. You may have a job that is that gives you livelihood, but it's a job among very unconscious beings, relatively unconscious beings, good beings, but relatively unconscious, in which you don't experience some support for that awakening. And you're ready, when you come into a satsang, into a community of more conscious beings, you're ready to say, well, I'm going to split my job because it's not conscious enough. But maybe that job at this time gives you the economic wherewithal to be able to do other kinds of work. And maybe what you need to do is learn how to use your weekends and your evenings and your early mornings. It isn't clear that you have to melodramatically shift your whole life plan just because you start to sense that there is awakening possible. In fact, let me caution you against the melodrama of the spiritual journey. We have an incredible capacity to romanticize our lives. Who will I marry? Who do I love? Who loves me? Am I happy? Am I getting enough? Oh, I'm dying too young. Ooh. And all this kind of romance about life. And we just buy it. And we are such tragic romantic figures, every one of us. If only, and it's all so dramatic. And then suddenly we've awakened, and it's a whole new drama, and I've awakened, and you go tell all your friends, and I'm awakened, and you have a certain smile, and you're very romantic about your awakening, and you got to dramatically change everything. I don't do that anymore, I'm awakened. And you'll pay karmically for all your romanticism, I will tell you. Because the spiritual journey ultimately is really not very romantic at all. It's a very humdrum, just cleaning up your act, quieting down, not getting caught in the drama even of enlightenment. Even to be attached to getting enlightened turns out to be just another melodrama. Okay. So One doesn't have to make splashy, dramatic front-page changes in one's life in order to be awakening. You can do it just in the kind of stuff you've already got going. You know, it's always an interesting question of whether you have to miss a step in the dance in order to awaken. And what I'm always impressed with is people who can make the transformations. Externally, there's continuity, and internally, there is tremendous change of being. Because every act you're doing, you could be doing from the consciousness you've got now, from the consciousness you used to have, or from the consciousness you will have. The same act may come out the same way, but its effects will be entirely different. You can feed another human being. You can say hello to another human being. You can do any human act, and it will have an entirely different effect depending on who's doing it and where they're doing it from. I've visited Anandamayi Ma many times in India. She's an absolutely beautiful woman saint. Just such an incredible being. And the times I visited her, each time she has been singing one song. She sings before a lot of people, just sitting up there singing. They are all just kind of looking at her, and she talks to people and gets them fed and all that. But she just sort of sings, either as to a large group, or she's just sort of crooning it. And she's just singing to Bhagavan, to God. Jai Om Bhagavan. 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 It's just such a sweet love song to God. And it's as if she's just whispering to a lover. And I have in my Dodge van a cruise control. The cruise control allows you to set a certain speed, and then the car just runs. So all you have to do is hold the steering wheel. And when I'm crossing the country, sometimes I'm sitting cross-legged in the driver's seat, and I'm just staring across the country. And I'm just day after day singing Jai Om Bhagavan, Jai Om Bhagavan, Jai Om Bhagavan, Jai Om Bhagavan. And very slowly, those words, which are just words, and it's just a little tune, but the levels and the play and the feelings, until pretty soon you look at the gas station attendant as you stop every so many hours for gas, and you're inside, you Jai Om Bhagavan, and there's Bhagavan. Okay? And you're just taking the whole country. And it's the first time when I started to do those things with this cruise control, it was the first time I ran out of country before I got bored. I got to the ocean too soon. I thought, oh, damn it, I'm here. I just wanted more of it. Now, that's just a simple thing of driving to work. Now, is it driving to work, or is it doing your sadhana in which during your sadhana you happen to be moving from one space to another? I'm trying to give you a sense of the flow of spiritual work, that it doesn't have to be, I do spiritual work. It just sort of creeps into your life like fog creeping in on, these silent fingers of stuff just creeping into the way in which you live your life. The kinds of things you want to read. It's like going from reading things that give you a rush or fascinate you or collect stuff to things that keep quieting your mind or simplifying your mind or tuning your mind. I work a great deal with the third Chinese patriarch. And it's a little thing called the Sin Sin Ming. Which means the Heart-Mind Sutra. And I just carry this little book with me all the time, and it's about 8 pages long. It's everything that he wrote. And there's enough work in here for me for this lifetime. Just these 2 lines. The great way, meaning coming into the flow of things, the harmony, coming into the universe. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. Okay? The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. Just look at your life and think of how many preferences you have. You prefer pleasure over pain? You prefer life over death? Prefer friends over aloneness? You prefer freedom over imprisonment? Where are your attachments? Where are your clingings? You prefer love over hate? Do you prefer any? Are you stuck in polarities is what it's asking. But make the smallest distinction and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. Slightest distinction and you already create hell. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything. To set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. Boy, you ready to live by that? Do you realize how spacious you have to be to live by that kind of philosophy? That's the fiercest kind of philosophy that I can find. And I like to have that kind of fierce friend who hangs out with me, who keeps reminding me how much I have opinions. This should be this, and this should be this, and I want everybody to be this, and wouldn't it be better if this? Instead of just being spacious with it, you do what you do. It doesn't mean you don't have opinions, it means you're not attached to your opinions. It doesn't mean you don't have preferences, it means you're not attached to your preferences. You can prefer blue or green, and deciding when you go in, when there's a choice, you pick blue over green. But if you end up with green, so. Remember the so story? So story of the monk who lived in a monastery, and the local girl down in the village got pregnant by the fisherman. She didn't want to lay it on the fisherman, so she said it was the monk up in the monastery. So when the baby was born, the townspeople all took the baby up to the monastery, and they knocked on the gate, and the monk opened the door, and they said to the monk, "This is your baby, and you've got to raise the baby." And he said, so. He took the baby and closed the gates. I mean, here's the guy's whole life just changed at that second. And his first reaction is, so. And 9 years later, the girl was dying, and she didn't want to die without admitting what had happened. And she said to the people, "Look, it really wasn't the monk, it was the fisherman." And they were horrified, and they went up to the monastery, and they knocked on the door. And he opened the gate, and there was this 9-year-old child next to him. And they said, "We've made a terrible mistake. This isn't your child, and from now on we'd like to help raise him, and you're free now to go back to your monastic life." So. He was so much right here that whatever new change comes in, so. How much are you ready to flow with life? And how much are you pressing against it? And that's the business of letting go of controls, letting go of models. The models you have of who you think you are keep entrapping. They keep entrapping me all the time. And they keep turning me off from the living space, the living truth that I can live in every second. And the beauty of having these books, what happens is, this is part of what's called satsang or sangha. Satsang is the Sanskrit and sangha is the Buddhist term. This is being around the community of people who realize that there is an awakening. And you finally sort of want to hang out more and more with those beings. But maybe your job doesn't have those beings in it. And maybe your family doesn't have those beings in it. It's nice to have, get into a little ritual or regimen so that every morning, for example, you get up and before the game gets going in life, so it gets so locked in, you start with some quieting down. You start with some meditation. You start with a reading, just one little reading. And I just have usually a puja space, a little space where I have some holy pictures. I have Anandamayi Ma, and I have Christ, and I have Buddha, and I have Maharaji, and just a few old buddies and friends I hang out with. And I just have them there, and I light a candle, and I light a little incense in the morning, and I sit down there. And then next to me, I have just a few books. The Ramayana, and I have Lao Tzu, and the Third Patriarch, and this and that. Maybe 5 or 6 books. And I'll sit quietly for a little while, and I'll look at the pictures and say good morning to all these beings. And just kind of open my heart to that space. Kind of feel their lives. And then I might just pick up one of these books and read maybe just a few lines. Sit down, sort of think about it for a little while, and then maybe meditate for 15 or 20 minutes. And as simple as that, and I'm just ready to face a day. And that begins me on the right track. And then during the day, I may use a dozen or 100 different techniques. If I'm driving, I may be singing Jai Om Bhagwan. I may be working with my beads and doing Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. I mean, you sit in the subway, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai. And pretty soon, all of the forms you're seeing and all the discomforts of your body and all of it is as if it's coming out of the mantra. And the mantra becomes the figure and the life experiences become the background, as opposed to the life experiences being the figure and the spiritual practices becoming the background. Just a simple transformation. And there is a way of shifting consciousness so that you look around and you see that what we are is a collection of souls in all these individual difference packages. And you can look further than that and see that we are all one in the form of many. Now, if you have seen that plane of reality, how does it affect this plane? See? When you come into this plane, you have the traces of that plane. And how do you live in this plane with the recognition that that plane is true? See, during the acid days, a lot of people would go up and they'd come down, and they couldn't figure out why they kept coming down. The reason they came down is because the life they lived on this plane was a denial of what they knew from these other planes. They, in effect, turned off the other planes. And now I'm talking about social action. I'm talking about the places you get to where you start to become able to live your life in a way that is harmonious with what you know on all these other planes. You literally die into service. You die into the plane of reality where you see that a starving person or a dying person or a hungry person or a frightened person is you. It's not her or him or them. You die in your separateness. The whole trip of what's good for me, what do I want, what do I need, what do I want, just becomes less interesting. And the minute that becomes surrendered, just given up, it falls away. It falls away from this deeper wisdom. And then you merely become an instrument of the flow of the universe. You become part of the Tao, part of the way of things. And the serving and that which is served is all part of it. It's all part of it. At that moment, there's no coming down or going up anymore. It just all is. That's when you become not mine but thy will. That's when you become an instrument of Christ consciousness. You just become the flow. And at that moment, that's where the power is. That's where the power is that changes the universe. When you can make yourself into zero, then your power is unbelievable. You are an irresistible force, where there is no high and there is no low, and there's no judgments and there's no opinions. There's no good and there's no bad. You merely are part of it. And then by the very you are the commandments. You are the precepts. You are the morality. You don't do it because you ought to do it. You are that which cannot hurt another human being. You just are. It's no big deal.